Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, retired 27-year veteran of the NYPD, Sergeant. And with me tonight is retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy. How about you?
You know, I just flew back from Florida. I sent you guys some videos while I was there. I had some fun, but in actuality, we only had one good day of weather. And then the next few days, one day it rained, and the next few days were just like the wind. You know, you get to Florida sometimes, and the wind is so high that you can't really have too much fun. But I'm not complaining. I had some fun, and I got away from this 20 degree weather here for a while.
Oh, that was
something, right? But you know, so while I was gone, it seemed like all these stories started breaking, and I'm like, oh my God, I should be home, you know, because even though I could still do a show on the road, I don't have all my equipment. I don't have my, I can't run the videos and all of that stuff. So I feel like a fish out of water a little bit, but I don't want to complain. So we're going to cover this tonight, and I just wanted to give kudos to Duty Ron, who did a great job covering this with Ed Wallace and Barbara Butcher. And of course, we're talking about the autopsy of Brian Laundrie that sort of answered a great deal of questions that many people will have. And before I get into that, we're going to come up with the Police Off the Cuff song, and we'll get right back into this. And folks, it's going to be a great show.
It's a show with two retired detectives that were in the thick of New York crime, fast and hectic. They got some stories and some jokes, even an interview with the most powerful folks. Off the cuff, one episode just ain't enough. Get a little laughter and an interview too. Maybe the best thing you can do.
Well, folks, we're back. We all know the story of Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito. It became sort of an international sensation. It caught the imagination. It caught the hearts, basically, of everyone when Gabby Petito was found dead. And, of course, the number one suspect was always Brian Laundrie. And, of course, the law enforcement and the media uses the term person of interest. And Phil and I jumped all over that early on, saying, no, he's a damn suspect. Stop with this person of interest nonsense. But there was lots and lots of questions that remained unanswered. And one of the problems, of course, is whenever the FBI is involved, they're not too friendly with the press. They don't release much information to the public. So a lot of things were left up to rumor. There was a lot of rumors about things that happened. And now with this 47-page report, it's pretty clear what occurred. Can they say 100% that Brian Laundrie committed suicide? They're satisfied that he did, and we're going to get into that. Can they say 100% that he killed Gabby Petito? And in fact, in his notebook, he confessed to it. Is that enough for most people? Is that with the conspiracy theorists, with people that want the smoke coming out of the gun and it on video? Will they accept that? I don't know. I think, though, when you have, you know, a totality of evidence and the preponderance of evidence on this case, it sort of satisfies most people in law enforcement. But there'll always be people that will second guess it, Phil.
Well, basically, Bill, in a court of law, we go by the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. Based on all of the facts that I read in this 49-page report, I would be very comfortable saying that I believe with beyond a reasonable doubt that Brian committed suicide. And I would also say that, and this is not knowing all of the investigation that was uncovered from the crime scene of Gabby Petito, where her body was found, as well as the crime scene the van when they did the crime scene, the investigation on that, the forensic investigation. I'm not going to say beyond a reasonable doubt, but I would say definitely a preponderance of the evidence, which is a lower standard, that, based on the fact that in the journal they found that he said he was he took responsibility for Gabby Petito's murder. So I would say if I did have that other information, I would be able to maybe get to beyond a reasonable doubt. But I think it's very clear that he's responsible for the murder. And I think beyond a reasonable doubt, he committed suicide.
Let's put a little bit here on the screen, and we'll play a little bit of this just to get back into what and when things happen.
Remains were positively identified as Laundrie, who had shot himself in the left side of the head. A single bullet was found 50 to 60 feet away, buried in about 6 inches of dirt. The report also reveals for the first time that Laundrie used a .38 caliber handgun found with 1 spent and 2 live rounds. And there was a new detail offered about the 23-year-old's personal belongings. We knew about the journal found in the dry bag, but the report indicates there was also a handwritten half note found near the remains, and a wooden box that contains a small notebook and pictures, including some images of Laundrie. Laundrie also had a tent and flares with him, but the tent was still in the backpack. Also new, one detective reported after the remains were found, he asked Chris and Roberta Laundrie about their son's social history, but the report says Mr. and Mrs. Laundrie stated that they did not want to provide information. And information about the results of toxicology testing. The comprehensive drug screen was completed just 10 days ago and indicated no drugs were detected in Laundrie's system.
So there's a quick sort of update of telling some of the things, a lot of the questions that people had, of course. A, let's get to was the gun discovered on the scene? No one knew that. B, was there any ballistic evidence found on the scene? What was the gun? What was the gun the same gun that the Laundrie family supposedly was missing one gun? Was that the same gun? Was it a close contact wound? Some of these things were answered in the autopsy, and I know that you read some of this or have been following this, and you could just answer some of the questions that I just raised if you'd like, Phil.
Sure. Well, let's go to the gunshot wound. It said that they actually recreated the whole skull. They put it back together with glue, believe it or not. But it said that there was a gunshot wound to the left temple and it exited through the right temple. It was a slightly upward, it was pointed in a slightly upward direction. It also said that there were extensive associated craniofacial fractures, which would be consistent with a gunshot wound. I don't think that there's anything so out of the ordinary in what I read in this report. The one thing that we'll talk about, I'm sure, they're saying that he was right-handed, but it was the bullet was to his left side of his head. Not probably, definitely, it was in the left temple, probably in his left hand. So again, there was that note that was a half note that was found. Maybe he was holding out his hand. He could have been holding something else in his right hand and he used the left hand. And I just wanted to make one thing clear about the handgun. They're saying 38, 357. I believe it to be a 357 handgun. And the reason I say that is because I know, and we discussed this previously, that a 357 can accommodate a 38 caliber round, whereas a 38 caliber handgun cannot accommodate a 357. It just wouldn't fit. It's a larger cartridge, so it wouldn't fit. So it was probably a 357 handgun. However, they're talking about 38 caliber rounds, so it could have been 38 caliber bullets. It's not a big difference in the bullet, just a larger bullet with a more gunpowder associated with the cartridge. So I think that's where that confusion is. We talked about off the air, Bill, you and I earlier today, that 22 long and short, that a 22 rifle can accommodate both of those bullets. So it's really a little bit confusing to people that don't know about firearms, but it was probably a 357 pistol, and the caliber of round that they found may have been 38.
Folks, a lot of people are concerned with the fact that the gunshot wound was from the left side. Excuse me, I'm on the left side of his head, and it exited out the right side of his temple. He was, according to his sister, right-handed. So a lot of people were bothered by the fact that he shot himself. If you believe that he committed suicide, he shot himself with his left hand, which is a little bit unusual, but not totally out of the realm of possibility. Barbara Butcher on Duty Ron's show, who's been to, I think, over 700 crime scenes in her OCME career, 700 homicide crime scenes, which is a extremely high number. And she had a case one time where the guy actually put the gun behind his head in a like this and shot himself in the back of his head. That's highly, highly unusual. But they found that through evidence, he in fact did do that. So is this a little unusual that someone who's a righty shoots themselves with their left hand? A little bit, but I don't think you can disqualify him from doing it that way. But yes, it is a little bit unusual. I would definitely say that.
Bill, I got to make a couple of points about that. Now, if this were just a person that was found dead with a gunshot wound to the head without a note, that wasn't under duress of a homicide investigation, as Brian was, the video of him being engaged in the argument and the fight with his girlfriend back on August 12th, all of these factors, if you look at everything in totality, the fact that he did have a notebook with, basically a suicide note, and he did take responsibility for Gabby's murder. There were photos. So if you took all of those things and took them out, and you found a person shot who was right-handed and shot themselves in the left side of their head, indicating maybe that they shot themselves with their left hand, then that would be highly suspicious to me. And then again, an investigation would go on and try and find out what their psychological state was, what was going on in their life, different things like that. But with all of the things, all of the facts that we have in this case, I'm very satisfied that that's a very small concern of mine, that he shot himself with his left hand. He may have been somewhat ambidextrous. We don't know. But again, like I said, he might have had something, he could have had rosary beads, let's say, which I don't think were found. I'm just giving an example. Could have had something in his hand, a picture of Gabby, and he just put the gun in his left hand and fired the shot. So it's not a big red flag for me at this point.
Lisa Cox, thank you for your remark. I'm ambidextrous, so I can use both left and right. My mother was left-handed. 3 of my brothers are just, and I just got lucky. And I can write left-handed. I can eat left-handed. I can do anything. That's, that's true for everyone. In fact, my own family, my 2 sons are both lefties, and my wife's a lefty. So she must have had the dominant, and she can't throw a baseball or a football either. So it didn't help them too much, but they're both left. So that's a weird thing. But, you talk about using right or left hand. Some of the other things in this report that, from an investigative standpoint, which point more and more guilt at Brian Laundrie, if you need more and more evidence, is the fact that he used Gabby's credit card. And we knew that on his travel back from Wyoming to Florida. And he also tried to throw off investigators by making a couple of text messages from the Moab Desert saying, there's no cell service. And then he also did a couple of other things to try to throw the investigators off. So that is a sign of someone who is guilty in trying to cover their tracks through being a little slick with law enforcement.
Absolutely, Billy. And again, I cited earlier that we don't know what was found on Gabby's body. We know that it was not recovered for a few weeks. We don't know what state of decomposition it was in. It was probably, 3 weeks is a long time in that environment. It was probably pretty badly decomposed. However, there still was the possibility that there could have been some DNA evidence of Brian's underneath her fingernails if they were intact. We don't know that. We don't know what evidence was recovered inside the back of the van. So if we took all of those things, he takes responsibility for it. And then if you had the other aspects of the investigation, like I said, the crime scene and the, the forensic investigation of the van, there might be other evidence that would really slam the door shut on him being 100% responsible beyond a reasonable doubt, so to speak. So I think that those things are probably were discussed with the family. I know that we talked about it, that the family did have a meeting with the FBI. I think it was probably about a month ago or so. And if you look at the report that was released, the 49 page report, the toxicology results were only returned back to the medical examiner on February the 4th of this year,
Right.
this last couple of weeks. So I think that's probably why they held off on releasing this whole autopsy report. They waited for that toxicology, and it wasn't a routine toxicology. You could just take blood out of someone that was, only dead a short period of time and do the toxicology. They had to go into tissue. They went into jawbone tissue, I believe, and some other tissue related to the teeth. So again, maybe that took a little bit longer than usual. And I don't know how extensive that can be to tell if there were drugs in the system, but it did say that for the drug screening, there were no drugs found in the system.
I want to hear a little bit from Barbara Butcher, who is, of course, one of Duty Ron's favorites and one of my favorites, of course.
Absolutely.
Privy to this stuff. But when we had Dr. Murray Marks go, one tooth, that's all it takes. Now we find out we have in the 20s, right, of teeth. So, what seems to be like a full set of skeletal remains, albeit they were scattered. How challenging is that to put that together, Barbara? How does that go?
It's very challenging when you have fragmentation of those remains. Let me say something first, though, about the forensic odontology. That gives you a fast identification. You can do it within a day. But that tooth and also one of his femurs, sampling was taken from the pulp of the tooth and from the marrow of the femur and compared to swabs from his parents. So he had a DNA identification to back up the odontology, which came in I think, November. The DNA confirmed that was indeed him. Anyway, so to the remains, they were completely skeletonized, as we see from the report. Just some tiny little bits of cartilaginous material. There was essentially a whole skeleton, except for the two kneecaps were missing. That's not unusual at all. They're fairly small bones, and these remains were scattered to some extent. There was a lot of evidence of animal feeding. There's gnawing and teeth marks from feral dogs, coyotes, rodents. And, these anthropologists, they know their tooth marks. Right. The serrated teeth of certain species, the smoother pointed tooth of dogs. So they know their stuff on this. And they can identify that scavenger activity. So the bones were scattered. I think the greatest challenge in the reconstruction of this skeleton was in his skull, which was extensively fragmented on the left temporal area where the gunshot entry was. And then it exited right parietal. That's the bone up here. Right. And that was a nice smooth hole with beveling inside, nice smooth exit. But the contact, or that's a presumption on my part. The fragmentation, to me, suggests a close wound, if not outright contact wound. And that resulted in fragmentation and shattering the bones around the left temporal and facial area, the sockets of the eyes, etc. And those little bones are very thin, especially under the eyes. So it took a good deal of trouble to sift through the dirt and the debris there and find all those bones and reconstruct them.
And that's,
Barbara Butcher is just so amazing. I mean, the way she explains it, you could tell not only is she a scientist, but she taught for a great many years. And I was one of her students. I took the criminal investigation course for the NYPD. And I also taught the criminal investigation course for the NYPD once I became more experienced. And Barbara Butcher was one of the most popular teachers at the CIC course because not only was she someone that knew her stuff, but she did it with a sense of humor, a macabre sense of humor in a way. But when she's talking about a close contact wound, when someone commits suicide, frequently they'll hold the barrel of the gun right against their head. If they pull the trigger with the gun in that position, it does something called tattooing. It leaves actually an imprint of the barrel of the gun, and you'll also have a burn, and you'll have stippling and gunshot residue around the wound. But because this body was out there for so long and also submerged in 3 feet of water after the shot was fired, there was no gunshot residue. They couldn't see, there was no tattooing apparently, but this could have all been washed away or eaten away. Obviously, animals ate away the skin and all the tissue. However, she explained the gunshot wound pretty damn well without there being gunshot residue or tattooing, the fragmentation of the bones. And that's why all of these anthropologists, they dug underneath the dirt for a specific footage to recover pieces of bone that would reconstruct this whole scene. In addition, with a metal detector, they found the projectile that came back to that gun. That is outstanding, outstanding work. I mean, amazing. You know, folks, just so while I'm on this subject, if you're not subscribed to Police Off the Cuff, please go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. And if you want to support us further, please join our Patreon. We have 3 levels of our Patreon. It really helps us do this show, keep it together. And for you guys that want to be part of the YouTube family of Police Off the Cuff, go on our YouTube. We have 5 different levels, and you can be part of our YouTube family. As you can see, all the folks in the chat with the green font, they're part of our YouTube family. So this case, I mean, so many of the questions that were being raised specifically in the online chats and the YouTube content creators weren't answered initially. But this 47-page report pretty much answers almost everything. There's always going to be people that are like, I still don't believe it. But scientifically, it pretty much answers almost any question that could be answered.
Absolutely, Billy. I just want to make one comment about Barbara Butcher. Not only does she know her stuff, but the way she explains it in terms that people, a layman, can understand, just ordinary people that are watching the podcast, they can understand, not so much scientifically, but just like common sense. In a common sense way, she explains it in wording that she makes you understand what she's talking about. And again, like you explained about the tattooing and the gunshot residue and the stippling and all of that from a contact wound, none of that flesh is there to show that it's just the skull, but the fragmentation explains that that's where the bullet went in. And then she explained how there was the exit wound with an upward trajectory. So, I mean, the way she did it, you could know nothing about criminal investigation and you understand it and you get it. So yeah, that was pretty good. Again, going back to the whole, like you said, there were so many questions about how he committed suicide, if he committed suicide, if he killed Gabby. Now that we have a better picture, I think we have probably about 80% of what went on in this investigation between Gabby's murder and this suicide. I mean, the only thing we don't know is the actual crime scene evidence of Gabby's murder, as well as the forensic evidence that was discovered inside the van, if there was any. So I think we pretty much answered most of the questions. And look, there's always going to be these keyboard warriors that are going to come up with conspiracy theories. Oh, no way did he shot himself. He's right-handed. It was left side. I think we explained it, and there's just so many variables, and you don't know what's going through a person's mind at the time they're going to do something like that. Again, like I said, maybe he could have had something of a prayer. He was praying, or maybe he was looking at Gabby. God only knows. Or maybe he read somewhere on the internet that if you shoot yourself in the head and you want to die instantly, it's got to be on the left side. We don't know. He could have heard that somewhere. There's so many different variables. It's not a big red flag for me. And I think anybody that talks about it from here going forward, you're just a conspiracy theorist. It's quite clear that he committed suicide. And I think it's quite clear that he was responsible for Gabby's murder. And I think it's time to basically just close the book on this, on this whole saga, this whole investigation.
Getting back to the crime scene, initially also there were rumors, of course, on the internet and unconfirmed rumors that they had just recovered a skull. And that, in fact, was not true.
Right.
In fact, pretty much the entire skeletal remains were recovered. And Barbara Butcher said in her great way, ligament type material was still ligament. I forgot, it wasn't the exact word she used, but
She was
used a
saying there
medical
wasn't
term.
much ligament left,
Yeah.
which is kind of it's harder than skin. It's not as hard as bone. It's kind of in the middle, so it lasts a little longer in decomposition. Basically, that's what she was trying to say, I guess.
Fuzzy Doxy, thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat,
Thank you.
thank you for the compliment. Thanks, great show again. You know, guys, we're not as Phil and I, neither of us are scientists, but we've worked a lot of homicides, and I studied a lot of this. If any of you guys are ever interested in a good book about homicide, it used to be the Bible. It was called the Bible, and it was called Practical Homicide Investigation by Vernon Geberth, who was a retired NYPD lieutenant. I used to use the book when I taught college, and I loved the book. However, I felt it needed to be updated to present day, and it never in all the chapters it never included anything about cell phones, anything about video, and that's a huge part. It never included anything about electronic devices, computers, all of that stuff. And I felt that the book is outstanding, but it needs to update and include some of that stuff. So if you're ever interested in getting a book, it's a textbook, but it's got really gruesome pictures, but it's meant as a reference for real homicide investigators. And it's called, again, I'll give him kudos, Vernon Geberth, who's a retired NYPD lieutenant from a long time ago. And the book is called Practical Homicide Investigation. So yeah, all of the scientific stuff that you really need to know, you know, we learn stuff like body temperature. That's one of the first things that medical legal investigators do when they go to a homicide scene. They look at the eyes of the deceased. They look for something called petechial hemorrhaging, which is one sign of possibly asphyxia. They always take the temperature of the body and they take it rectally. That is one indicator of time of death. Not very accurate, but is an indicator. And of course, there's stuff called rigor mortis, algor mortis, lividity. So all of those things are the scientific part of homicide investigation. And I've said a million times, investigation, there's two parts to it. There's the scientific part and there's the policing part. So there's an art and there's a science of it. And the policing part, the questioning, the collecting of evidence, the talking to people, the doing accurate reports, looking at crime scenes, doing a victim, all of that is the art of investigation. The science includes DNA, medical legal investigators, crime scene, collecting evidence, fibers, hairs, all of that stuff comes into play. And all of that stuff came into play in this case. Kathy Elkins, thank you so much for the 1999 super chat.
Very nice compliment.
And the compliment. You two are the best. We really appreciate that. We're working hard, and I'm trying to compete with Duty Ron. I can't do it, but we're not competing. He helps me out a lot, and I'm very thankful for that. But this case, there's a lot of people that are doing what we're doing on YouTube. We're called content creators. Some qualified, some not so qualified. And it's sometimes you have to really take it from, the Barbara Butchers, the Duty Rons, the people with a background in this, rather than someone that's just trying to put out material that isn't really, they're not qualified to talk about. I'll put it that way.
Bill, you're talking about the practical part of police investigation, homicide investigation, and the scientific, and they go hand in hand. But when you get down to it, when you work a case, anytime that the practical part, like interview, interrogation, things of that nature, the things that we do early on in the investigation, when it comes down to an arrest and you're going to a trial, the district attorney's office, they always look for that scientific evidence because that's usually irrefutable. It's usually kind of very strong evidence. They like to see that. Eyewitnesses, they could be a little bit off at times, and a detective's interview and interrogation skills are always called into question at trials and stuff. Did you threaten my client and things like that? But again, the two of them run together, practical and scientific, and without the two of them working together, I don't think you could come up with a conviction in almost any case.
No, and some of the other things that we neglected to mention, there was other evidence recovered. For example, Brian Laundrie's clothing. There was a green pair of shorts. There was also a journal that was contained in what's described as a dry bag. That's why it was preserved, because it was 3 feet underwater, but it was preserved because it was inside this bag that was designed to keep it dry. So no one knows what the confession note said or the suicide note. There was also a piece of paper, another half a note recovered, and it was described there was a journal as well as a notebook. So it's unclear whether he confessed in the journal or he confessed in the notebook. But these are all things that the investigators know. But it's an important thing to know if this case, if Brian Laundrie hadn't committed suicide and he was arrested and went to trial, all of this evidence, well, obviously we wouldn't have the confession, but all of this evidence would be used against him.
Billy, there was one other thing that they found, and it was cited in the report. He went into the hiking trail of the Carlton Reserve. I guess it's the Myakkahatchee Reserve as well. I guess it was both names, but
that's pretty good pronunciation for a guy from Brooklyn. Myakkahatchee. There's definitely no street in Brooklyn called Myakkahatchee Preserve.
Well, I probably repeated that term about 25 or 30 times in all the different podcasts that we did on this case. But, he went into the reserve on the 13th of September. They found flares and they found a tent still in his backpack. So he probably committed suicide on that day. In the following days, there was great amounts of rain and it flooded the area. So now if his body was there for a day or two, there could have been some animal, interdiction where they could have came and fed off of the body, the remains. Then it filled up with water. That may have preserved some of it, but it also speeds up decomposition. Flesh will fall off when it's in water over a period of time. And then once it receded and then everything kind of settled into where it originally was. And, that's when everything was found. There were two scenes. There was the main scene and there was a secondary scene. The main scene is where most of the skeletal remains were found. The secondary scene had the clothing and some more skeletal remains. There might have been animals that dragged part of it away, went to another area to feed. So that could be the reason that there were two different scenes, or it could be when the area filled up with water that parts of the body were separated. And I think the amount of distance wasn't that great of a distance. Might have been as much as 200 feet, 250 feet from what I read. But there was definitely 3 feet or more of water in the area. There was water lines on the trees in the area. So there was definitely underwater for some period of time. And again, they did such a tremendous crime scene investigation. They went down 6 centimeters around the areas of the bodies where the skeletal remains were found and sifted it. That's how they came up with most of the bones, because a lot of the bones weren't recovered right away. Some of the smaller bones and the fragments were recovered later on when they sifted through it. And then again, with that metal detector, the round was found 6 inches under the ground. So that's pretty good police work, I would say. That's pretty good.
I'd say that's outstanding police work.
Absolutely,
to find it. And then also the ballistics part of that is to match it to that gun, which once you find it, they fire a different round into the tank. They pull the round out of the tank and they compare it to that piece of ballistics that was fired and actually entered and exited his head and then fell onto the ground. And the fact that they found it is miraculous.
Yeah, that truly is. That shows a great deal of effort went into this whole investigation and specifically the crime scene over where Brian was found. There was one other thing in there that I found. Now,
Phil, let me just Nikki Bella.
Sure.
He fired from the gun from the left temple, and the bullet exited out the right temple, and that's why they found the bullet, as we were just talking about. Actually, the correct terminology is projectile.
Right.
That's why they found it 6 inches below the earth via using a metal detector. But it was fired from left to right, and it exited out his right temple. I just thought I'd make that clear.
From whatever position his head was in, the trajectory was from the, all right, I'm going to do it from this side. From the left side, the trajectory was up. It was in an upward direction. Of course, it went in here, it went out above the ear, I would say, but in the temple area. That's from what I read. That's what it sounds like. Now, we don't know if his head was pointed down, though. He may have had it like this, and that's how it wound up 50 feet and then into the ground. Or it could have the bullet just lost energy and went into the ground as well.
I think that's Phil. I think that's more likely, because since it hit almost all bone, it was probably very slowly exited, and it probably wasn't far from where his body was. And in a lot of autopsies, what they'll do, there's something called bullet track, and they'll actually put a steel rod through the gunshot wound, and they'll track it, and then they'll X-ray it to show, in case the case would ever go to trial. In this case, obviously not, but that would show the bullet track, and that's how it would be done. I don't know if they did it in this case, because they really just found skeletal remains, and they did recover the round, so I don't think the bullet track was all that difficult to track, even without doing that procedure.
Yeah, Billy, that's a good point that you bring up. That's one of the techniques that they use to see trajectory of the bullet. I had a case one time in Coney Island Hospital in Brooklyn where shots were fired and bullets entered, went through an ambulance and entered the emergency room. It was fired from up on the roof, and we used a laser. The NYPD has a laser that it shoots a straight line through both angles. So if you have two surfaces that are pierced by a bullet, which we did, they put the laser through one side where the first bullet hole is, and then it lines up with the second bullet hole, and it gave us the exact location where the bullet was fired from. It was like the 10th floor landing. I think the building was 11 stories, but there was a landing on the 10th floor, and we actually figured out that that's where the bullet was fired from by enlisting the laser. But there's so many different things in crime scene investigation that are used. One of the things I wanted to bring up, the medical examiners contacted Chris and Roberta Laundrie, obviously, to get a swab of their DNA to match up to Brian's remains, which were done through DNA and through the dental records. We know that it's 100% him. But they asked questions about his health, and they said he had no health problems. He was in good health, and they asked about medications. They said he wasn't on any medications. And then when the medical examiner asked about his social history, they said that they didn't want to discuss that. Now, right away, people are going to say, well, that's a red flag. Why didn't they want to talk about it? They were probably directed on the advice of their attorney. And probably when they were being asked these questions, their attorney was probably present or on the phone and probably told them, don't discuss that, because it was really something that they didn't have to discuss and they didn't want to discuss. So I don't think it's a big major red flag. They did. In that report that you played in the beginning, Bill, the reporter did make mention of that. What do you think about that, Bill? You find that odd, suspicious, anything like that, or it's probably on the advice of the attorney? Would you agree with that?
Look, they weren't cooperative from day one. So I think that they just don't even want to be asked any more questions. I think they're very concerned potentially to be sued civilly. So I think they may smell a trap. So I think that they didn't want to answer any questions. Firewife 9/11. What I meant was Brian Laundrie was right-handed. Why would he shoot from the left side? Firewife 9/11. We just discussed that in length, and it's unusual but not improbable that he shot with his left hand. Most people, if they commit suicide and they're right-handed, they use their right-handed to shoot. However, we can't discount that he did it because he did shoot with his left hand. We spoke to Barbara Butcher, or Barbara Butcher was questioned, and she's been to I believe, almost 700 homicide scenes. And she said it wasn't that unusual. I want to just play a little bit of another.
Bill, can
news-
I just address Firewife? One quick thing. I just want to make a quick
Go ahead.
statement about it. You have to put yourself in the mind of a person that's distraught, that's contemplating, and then follows through committing suicide. You don't know what's going through that person's mind. There was some photos found. There was a half a note found. We don't know if he was holding that in his right hand, and that could be the reason that he used his left hand to fire the shot. There's so many different variables. It's unusual, like I said. If it would be just that there was no indication of suicide, no suicide note, he wasn't under investigation for murder, then it would probably have a little bit more of a suspicious value. The fact that we know all these other things, I really don't think it's that suspicious at all.
Nearly 5 months after Gabby Petito disappeared during a cross-country road trip with her fiancé, FBI Denver Division Special Agent in charge, Michael Schneider, says the investigation did not identify any other individuals other than Brian Laundrie directly involved in the tragic death of Gabby Petito. The FBI's primary focus throughout the investigation was to bring justice to Gabby and her family. 8 days after Nicole Schmidt reported her daughter missing on September 11th, Gabby's remains were found at the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Wyoming. The Teton County Coroner's Office says she died of blunt force injuries to the head and neck with manual strangulation. On September 17th, Laundrie's parents reported their son missing after he went hiking near their Northport home. After an extensive month-long search by law enforcement, Laundrie's parents located an item belonging to their son on October 20th in the Carlton Reserve. The FBI revealing near his remains, they found a backpack, revolver, and a notebook with a written confession. The Sarasota County Medical Examiner says Laundrie died of a self-inflicted gunshot. The attorney for Petito's parents, Richard Stafford, sent 8 on Your Side a statement saying, "We truly appreciate the FBI's diligent and painstaking efforts in this extremely complicated case. The quality and quantity of the facts and information collected by the FBI leave no doubt Brian Laundrie murdered Gabby." The Laundrie family attorney, Stephen Bertolino, says, "We can only hope with today's closure of the case, each family can begin to heal and move forward and find peace in and with the memories of their children."
So that was a brief sort of synopsis of the whole case, but I sort of think it did a pretty good job of synopsizing everything that occurred. One of the things that people are unsatisfied with is people are feeling there was involvement by Chris and Roberta Laundrie. And people ask the question, what will happen to them now? Will there be a civil case? Will they be prosecuted? And I think that somewhere and unsaid in this investigation, there was a deal between the FBI and Chris and Roberta Laundrie. I really do, because there was some strange things going on. And Duty Ron mentioned it in his broadcast about when they went camping after he got home. Do you remember that? The family camping trip?
Yep.
That was very bizarre. That was quite strange. And we also,
what else too, Billy, they bought that camper to go camping. Listen, I'm going to have a little bit of conjecture here, but it sounds to me like they were planning to put him into the woods in his camper where he could stay for a period of time. That's what it sounds like to me. And then it all kind of fell apart because there was such a tremendous amount of media attention to this case. They knew they couldn't pull it off. That's what I think was going on there. And that would indicate that they had information to believe that he had killed Gabby, or I don't think they doubted it in their minds. I mean,
Phil, I think 100% he told them he did. I think to think anything else would be, to me, would be ridiculous. And the Laundrie attorney, Stephen Bertolino, I mean, I didn't, I'm a little conflicted with the advice that he gave. And I understand most attorneys will say, don't talk to law enforcement, don't talk to the police, don't cooperate. However, that advice resulted in the suicide of Brian Laundrie. And you can't pin it on Stephen Bertolino directly, but let's say it contributed to the circumstance where he committed suicide.
You know what, Billy? I think at the end of the day, his actions may have been from a legal standpoint as an attorney trying to give his clients the best advice, but the parents are going to have to live with that. I think that probably very guilty about it that they allowed Brian to go into that reserve, and he eventually committed suicide. The smart move, and we called it from the beginning, would have been to try and get out in front of it. Mount some kind of a legal defense that possibly he could have gotten an acquittal in a trial. And if he did get convicted, or if there was just such an overwhelming amount of evidence, then try to make a deal where he does a period of time in jail and he has, he gets to see the light of day somewhere down the line. They could have been visiting their son in a jail as opposed to a cemetery had things been played out differently. I'm sure that they have regrets about it, and I don't want to, beat them up any more than they're both, being beat up. And when you played the beginning of that video and you see those two young people, it's really a shame that two young Americans lost their lives. And for what? What was it? An argument? There was a disagreement. Things got out of control. She's dead, and then he winds up committing suicide down the line. It's really tragic, and I feel bad for all the parties involved, all the families, and they're going to probably carry around a lot of guilt. And maybe Bertolino was trying to give the best advice that he can from a lawyer's standpoint. But I think that they needed to maybe grab the bull by the horns a little more and get into this thing a little bit better and not allow him to go off on his own. I don't know. Maybe it's just the thought never crossed their mind that he could be suicidal, but.
No, something. I don't buy that. I think that they knew everything that he knew, and I think that you were right when you say that maybe if the attorney would have said, "Turn yourself in," and I'll be there to represent you, and don't talk, and we'll mount a defense, because at some they had that warrant. Remember that warrant they had for him for. I think it was for grand larceny, the equivalence of grand larceny.
Yeah, it was.
Illegally using a access device. I think that's what the charge was.
They were saying illegal use of an electronic device, which is a credit card. So yeah.
Right. So if he would have,
maybe that conversation did take place. See, we don't know what the lawyer told him, and they might have said, "No, we're not doing that." Where he's going to go into. We don't know. We don't know what transpired. I mean, I would think if he was going to be logical about it, and if he knew anything about criminal law, that would be the way, that you should have really played this thing. But again, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Bill. I know you were right in the middle of a thought.
No, I'm just saying that we discussed this. This has been discussed ad nauseum, not just by us, but by other content providers, by a lot of people conjecturing. A lot of you folks in the chat, and everyone has a right to their opinion and to conjecture what happened. But perhaps if the attorney would have said, no, we're going to turn you in, and we're going to plead no contest, or we're going to plead not guilty to this, and we're going to fight it. And not that he would have beat it, maybe he wouldn't have, but something, even a plea of manslaughter or a guilt of manslaughter is better than death, which is what occurred. And who knows if he could ever have had the strength to face the charges, because we all would say that suicide is a weak person's way out, and he certainly, I believe he was a weak person.
Yeah, I'm sure he was obviously very distraught. I don't think that there was a lot of pondering. He went into the reserve on the 13th. He never even set up the tent. You would need some type of shelter from animals and stuff like that, or just even mosquitoes and bugs. So he probably committed suicide not long after getting into that reserve. So, had this thing been played differently, he could have been alive. And, like I said, they could have been visiting him in jail. And then, again, we don't know. Maybe there wasn't a lot of evidence that would have come forward that they could have gotten a conviction too, So, but it turned out the way it turned out. I feel bad, and I offer condolences to Gabby's family, and as well as Brian's family, because I know that those people are going to have heavy hearts. They're going to have a lot of weight on their shoulders based on what took place. So, it's their child. I'm sure that they loved him, and it is what it is. Who knows what his what went on in the past that maybe they might feel even more guilt if they knew that he was a domestic abuser and they didn't do anything about it. They didn't take any action. So there's a lot of things that could be going on in that family. But and then they took a lot of pressure from the media. And, this was an international outcry, this case. It was an international media event. So they did have, constant news media outside their home throughout the whole ordeal. So, yeah, it's a tough thing for everybody involved.
Folks, one of the things that, and we covered this case right from the beginning, one of the things that maybe this case will shine a spotlight on is the domestic violence portion of this case. And we know we watched numerous times them being pulled over, Gabby and Brian being pulled over by the Moab police. And we can argue that the Moab police, had they arrested both of them, that maybe Gabby would be alive today. We don't know that. 15 days went by between the time that they were pulled over by the Moab police and we believe the time that Gabby was murdered. So had they arrested both of them, would that have prevented the murder? I don't know. The other question is, do we really believe that the Moab police did a bad job, that they should be punished and sanctioned for this? That we mentioned numerous times, they spent an hour and 15 minutes on this case, on the car stop. I'll tell you right now, that doesn't happen in New York City. And
100%.
To me, it looked like they did a pretty good job. And I've taken some hits for that, for my opinion, but that's okay. That's why I get paid the big bucks. That's what I used to say when I was a sergeant. I make decisions because I get paid the big bucks, even though it wasn't that big. But, you got to make a decision. And I thought that Sandra H. says the arrest would not have prevented a thing. I agree with you, Sandra. I think you're 100% correct. However, it's sort of a stain now on the Moab police that occurred under their watch, that occurred, under the eyes of the entire world. And it makes them, as a department and the officers involved, it makes them look bad, even though I don't think they did a bad job,
100%, Billy. They probably went above and beyond it. Like you said, in New York City, they would have never gotten an hour and 15 minutes out of a domestic violence call. There were no real, sure signs. Then when he was bleeding, there wasn't eyewitnesses on the scene that showed up and said he was hitting her or vice versa. And in fact, some of the initial investigation, she said that she had hit him. So, like you said, if this happened the next day, then I'd say, well, you know what? An arrest would have prevented it. Chances are, but it was 15 days later. We don't know. It seemed like there was a tumultuous relationship between the two. So we don't know what was going on before this, behind closed doors. And we do know that on the 27th, when we all believed that she was murdered, that there was some type of a incident at the restaurant, the Piglet restaurant, I believe it was called. And he was described as being out of control and, very angry and became enraged and got into a fight. So who knows after that if it just escalated more and more and it led to Gabby's death. But, it's just an unfortunate thing. The whole thing is unfortunate. I'm glad you brought up about the domestic violence angle of it. If there's things that can come out of it good, they say, every dark cloud has a silver lining. The silver lining should be a little bit more training and a little bit more questioning. And we brought up in the past when we had other people on the podcast about maybe just asking that person, do you feel safe? Are you okay? That may have changed things too. So let's hope that those things will come out of it.
Fuzzy Doxy, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. I think the police did a good job. I think they were very concerned about Gabby with OCD going to jail. Fuzzy Doxy, I agree with you, and we went over this numerous times. I just want to do the quick shout out to Joe Murray's commercial here.
Joe Murray, attorney at law. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com. Kind of miss Joe Murray. He's a great guy, and we love having him on the show.
You know, I actually asked Joe to come on tonight, and he's preparing for trial, so he couldn't do it. So
the big bucks.
yeah, he's he's a busy guy, and we love when he comes on. I think he loves to come on our show, and we love the dissenting opinion.
Yes.
Without dissent, how do you know what's right and what's wrong? If everyone agrees, right, you never know what's right, and that's why the Supreme Court always has a dissenting opinion. Even when something passes, there's dissenting justices that'll write the dissenting opinion. So, folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Myself and Phil, we've been working hard doing these shows. Scientifically, I don't think anyone could have done a better job than Duty Ron did the other night with Barbara Butcher and, of course, Ed Wallace. They really dissected all of that scientific evidence. But there's other parts of this, and that's why we wanted to put our 2 cents, if you will, into
I got to say something about Joe Murray, because his dissenting opinion now, maybe he does it just to be a chop buster, but I don't think so. I think he really does it because he wants to make sure that beyond a reasonable doubt, like I form an opinion about something, and now he says something that might be contrary to what I said. And it gets me thinking. And then, I'm either going to say, yeah, you know what? Maybe he's right about that, or I'm going to, go harder on what I believe based on common sense, scientific evidence, and my experience as a detective. But like you said, Bill, that dissenting opinion, it's challenging what you're saying, and you're going to get challenged in court. So that's why I love it. If it's just like, I feel like, listen, I'm retired from the job. I'm not going to court anymore. I'm not going to be challenged in court. But however, when we're talking about these things, it's like getting that challenge now, so that's why we love Joe. He's a great attorney. He's a former police officer, and he's definitely a constitutionalist. And this is the way our system of justice works. So it's great to have him on. And I have no problem with being challenged on what my opinion is. So because if you have an opinion, you have to be able to back it up. Why do you have that opinion? So that's what we try to do on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeffrey Crowley, thank you so much for the $5 super chat and the compliment. You guys are great and so professional. Was impressed with thoroughness of the Laundrie autopsy. Yeah, I was too. I thought that the police in Parkland Police, and I guess the FBI, the ME from that location, they did an outstanding job. When you think of a small jurisdiction like Parkland, think of what that investigation cost that jurisdiction. You're probably talking millions of dollars, because police overtime, all the
You're referring to the Parkland shooting, Bill?
No. I'm talking about the police from that was the area that covered Brian Laundrie's home.
Okay.
And think of the money that investigation cost. In fact, you brought up the Parkland shooting. I believe it was just the anniversary of that. And I was, as I said, I was just down in Florida. And, when you hear of those active shooters, are just the most horrendous thing when young people get killed for no reason whatsoever. It's just, it's so heartbreaking, Folks, we got a lot of good stuff coming up. This Monday, I have Eric Schubert coming on, and you guys are going to be fascinated by this kid. And I say kid, he's 20 years old, and he's a genealogist. And he just solved an almost 60-year-old murder case of a 9-year-old girl who was murdered and raped. And with his genealogical work, he found out a suspect, and he positively, through genealogy, identified this suspect, and of course, married the DNA to this guy. Unfortunately, and I say it this way, is the perpetrator is dead. He's been dead since, I think,
he was deceased by a number of years.
2000 or 1980. So he's been dead a long time. So he'll never be brought to justice. But at least the family has closure and knows who did this. And look, the guy will be punished if you believe in a God. He'll be punished. Right. He'll be punished by by the man upstairs. But anyway, Eric Schubert is a brilliant guy, and we're going to have Lisa Lockwood, who is she's going to be on the show with us. to do a dive into this with Eric. And Eric's like a great kid. We had him on the show once before, and I don't fully understand genealogy and how he does it. So, it'll be an education for Phil and I also.
Absolutely, Billy. It's fascinating to think about. First of all, he's a 20-year-old kid, and he's got some tremendous knowledge about genealogy. And I don't know a lot about it. You don't know a lot about it. So it's going to be very interesting for us. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of great questions. But think about that. He solved a case that was over 50 years old based on his genealogy experience and knowledge. So I really love it. I'm really chomping at the bit to hear to get involved and hear this whole story on Monday. That's going to be
he
great.
started out doing finding people.
Right.
Lost relatives and stuff. And he started doing this when he was 13 years old. So he's a veteran. He's been doing it for 7, and he's so good at it now because obviously, he puts the time in, let's put it that way. But when like on your computer, when you have like open windows, he's told us the last time, sometimes they'll have 60 or 70 open windows. I'm like, how can you do that? I would go crazy, But,
boy, that's tenacious. Huh? I mean, I think he said he started when he was on the last time. He said he started because of people that were adopted trying to find their real parents. So that's how I guess it started, and then he just morphed into. I guess he's like a super sleuth now.
Yeah, he has his own business, and he actually, I think the police work he does gratis. He does for free, and just
That's
for
great.
Rodhound, thank you so much for the $27.99 super chat.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you that you like our show. And I appreciate all you guys that are big, supporting Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories, because Phil and I work hard at this, and it's a struggle, it's a struggle. We're trying to build our audience one brick at a time, just like they build buildings, but this was an interesting, I think that we presented a little bit differently than others, but I think it was an interesting dive into this, and not a deep dive, but a dive nonetheless. And, as I said, we covered this story right from the beginning. It's interesting as hell. And unfortunately, there was a bad ending. Phil, final words?
Final words. First thing I want to say is thank you to our subscribers. We got so many nice comments tonight. Thank you so much. That makes us feel like we're doing something right here. We got into this case right from the beginning. We did a lot of research on it. We tried to stay plugged in. I looked at that report and I said, oh my God, they really went above and beyond. They did a tremendous investigation. I mean, they took little tiny bone fragments and they glued them together to get the as much as they can of a whole skull to examine and, figure out the trajectory of the bullet and stuff like that. But again, let's just say a prayer for these people that they lost loved ones, specifically Gabby Petito's family and Gabby Petito. May she rest in peace. And thank you so much again to our fans. If anything else should obviously pop up on this case, we'll be right on it. But we got a few other good things in the works. We're working on a few other topics and guests. And Monday night should be a good one. I'm very excited to get into that one. That's going to be real interesting.
Yeah, that should be great. Folks, thank you so much for all your support and for listening and for always supporting us. It's really appreciated. And I see some of the same names in our chat, and I see some new ones. And the new ones, please subscribe and become part of the Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories family. Good night, everyone. Have a safe evening.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.